All right. Well, we are here with Miss Lisa Fischer. How are you, Lisa?
What up? Represent Arkansas. We've got the Southwest, West used to be the Southwest Conference, but the Southeast Conference now representing here with TCU, University of Arkansas. So I'm ready to go.
There you go. Awesome. Well, I'm so glad to finally get to meet you sort of
Yeah,
face to
yeah,
face.
I know.
I have listened to your podcast, which is awesome.
Thank
And
you.
we've chatted a little bit through
Yeah.
social media and whatnot. So I've really enjoyed kind of following your story and getting to know you. And speaking of your story, that is why we are here. I want to hear about your health journey and share that with my audience and the people of my world. So, first of all, before we get into that, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I call myself the Oprah of Arkansas because I've interviewed everybody. I've been on radio, TV as long as Oprah. Back when Oprah started, I started in Arkansas about the same time. Now I'm a little younger than she is. I'll be 60 in January. So, but since the 80s, big shoulder pads, I had a microphone in my hand, and I was a TV reporter
There
and
you go.
so anchoring the or radio news, doing TV anchoring, all the things, and interviewing people. So I'm a journalist from my heart, Chrysler. I love asking questions. I like knowing facts. And that's why these last 2 years have been difficult for me as a journalist, because sometimes I've had to keep my mouth shut because I was going, but those facts don't match up. They don't line up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's been real challenging in fact, I've kind of abandoned traditional journalism because it's not even the same anymore. I haven't turned the
Mm,
TV on since March 10th, 2020,
wow.
because I felt like I was being blamed for somebody having COVID because maybe I didn't wear my mask that day or something. And
Yeah.
I don't like that. So I am a journalist. I was born in Newark, New Jersey, actually, was raised by alcoholic parents. I moved to New Orleans when I was 11. When I was 12, my mother overdosed and died, and my parents had been divorced. So I had to move to Arkansas, and my cousins adopted me in Southeast Arkansas. And so
Wow. So you
that,
have lived a life.
yes, that's
Oh
who
my
raised me. In
goodness.
fact, I have a high ACE score, adverse childhood experiences. And so that could be the catalyst for my health conditions. I have 6 autoimmune conditions, and it was about 20 years ago. I'd kind of taken a break from radio TV because I was homeschooling my kids, and I got back in. But I mean, I was still doing some things, but I wasn't working full time. But I was ill. I didn't feel well, and
Mm.
I have Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which will really punch you in the gut because you keep going to the doctor saying, my hair's falling out, I'm constipated, I'm cold, I'm losing a third of my eyebrows, my
Hmm.
nails are splitting, I've gained weight. They say, well, you're depressed. And my husband would say, you're not depressed. He'd say, but you're
Yeah.
the most tired human I've ever met,
Hmm.
because I was so dang tired. And that's a thyroid symptom. Or some of the thyroid symptoms include that. And so it was 2003. It took 4 years to get diagnosed with thyroid disease. And then
Wow.
once it kind of made sense for the other autoimmune conditions. You can see I have vitiligo. That's the
Okay.
disease.
Yeah. As you see
I
that.
look like a giraffe. It's spotted. It's kind of pretty, but it's not really what I want on my face. So
Right.
I do cover my face with the industrial makeup anytime I'm on camera, just
Hmm.
because it's so splotchy. It's so weird. It's a disease Michael Jackson said he had, or the condition, but he likely had his treated. I think there is an option where I could have all my pigment removed, but then I might get
Hmm.
kidney cancer. So I'm not going to do that one.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but all that to say, that was kind of what was really the carrot that dangled that made me, as a journalist, remember, that's my interest of finding
Yeah.
out why and how and doing all the research. And so I did all the research on autoimmune. So I was so schooled in it that doctors in Little Rock still call me asking me thyroid questions. And I'll have to say, they'll call and say things like, I have a patient presenting with tachycardia. I'll go, I'm not a real doctor. I have no idea
Right.
what that means. I understand the
Break
function
it
of the
down.
thyroid. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was still on the radio. I had the morning show here on the top radio station. And I started seeing maybe an exit for me. And that was really before the political changes happened. They wouldn't have kept me because I did not get immunized, and they fired everybody. who was not vaccinated. So that just kind of all worked out. It was serendipitous, or whatever. I feel like God, I know the Lord is involved in my life. And I started editing for a magazine, started writing. And then my daughter she's the one who said she was going to get a health coaching certification. And Dr. Amy Beard is a functional medicine doctor in Little Rock, whom I
Yes,
respect so
love
much.
Dr. Beard.
And I asked Dr. Beard, where do we go? What do we do? Because she has a health coach. She goes, oh, she said, for now, use the Institute for Integrated Nutrition, New York. And most of my philosophies lined up with them. They went a little too much of a tangent on veganism, because I think women over 40 have to have more protein. And again, if God made it, eat it or use it. And God made the animals. So I have a little bit of a hard time with some of their philosophies, but I do like the instruction I got and to equip me to health coaching. And so that was kind of my foray into, not that I've abandoned my journalism career. I still do some things for people. I still do some marketing. I do some TV commercials, but I really like I like helping people unlock the mysteries and help them figure out why they're overweight. Because I know I have the cure for that. I know the cure for that, and that's intermittent fasting. It's just reducing your insulin. And then also with thyroid. So my two specialties are fasting and thyroid disease.
Okay. Wow. That is a story, sister.
Yeah.
So when you were finally diagnosed, what was that like for you? How did you feel?
Well, I cried in the doctor's office because he sat there with me, and I'd been telling the story for 4 years that I was constipated, cold, my hair was falling out, I had heavy periods, my nails were splitting. I was so tired. I gained 10 pounds. They really don't care if you gain 10 pounds because I was almost 40. I was 39 when this happened. It was 20 years ago. And they really don't care. They're like, yeah, whatever, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
In fact, they said,
that's normal.
Yes, normal. You need to have an ablation. I was like, leave my parts out of this. I want to keep all my parts. I don't want to fiddle with my parts. And finally, that endocrinologist, I kept having the test done and the lab results were normal. And finally, a doctor said, I believe the patient. If the patient thinks something's not right, I'm going to send her on. So he did send me to an endocrinologist, which I don't necessarily send any of my clients there. I'm not patients. I'm not a real doctor. My clients there, because sometimes endocrinologists are the accountants of the medical world. They only look at teeny tiny numbers and they don't listen to the patient. But this man did sit there and he asked some things. So a question you need to ask anytime someone comes to you and says, I have these symptoms, you can start saying, what was your mama like? Your mama overweight? Was your mama, did she, anything, So remember, my mother died at 12 of an overdose. But when I lined out everything in her life, I remember right before my mother did that, she was obviously an addict, but during that time, she was about to go to a doctor because she had heavy menstrual cycles. And so he was like over here going, check. And he said, he goes, was your mother depressed? I went, yeah, she had been depressed. Was she overweight? I said, no, she smoked and drank all day. He goes, well, that's why she wasn't overweight, And he went through the list and he looked at me, he goes, your mother had thyroid disease. And I went, and he said, you have thyroid disease. And I'm not a cusser, but I almost said, no, S-H-I-T. I went, because I said, I've been saying this for 4 years. And he goes, let me guess. They said you were depressed or had chronic fatigue syndrome. And I went, they said depression. I go, why? And he said, because it's almost easier to treat. He goes, thyroid's hard to treat because to titrate the medicine. And then he came behind me and he palpated my thyroid, which anyone listening or watching, if you are suspicious, have a healthcare provider palpate the gland to come behind you and put their fingers, it's a butterfly shaped gland right here. And if it swells, something's not right, because the pituitary sends a message for you to make more thyroid hormone or not make, or to make less for people who have Graves' disease. And so the gland will swell, and my gland was swollen, and he walked away and said, he said, he goes, you have an impressive thyroid. I go, thank you. And he goes, no, that's not a compliment. It's remarkable or whatever the word was. I was like, thanks. And he goes, no, it's large. And I went, not a good thing? He went, no. He said,
No.
and that's before he even did the lab work. And then he saw the lab work from my doctor. And so the range on the TSH, the thyroid stimulating hormone, is usually about 0.5 to about 3.9, depending what lab you use. And mine was at 3.8. So it was knocking at the door. So when the thyroid lab goes up, it
Mm-hmm.
means you're low in thyroid. It's the opposite of what you think, because it's the pituitary, telling the pituitary to make more thyroid.
Right.
And so that number was right there knocking on the door. And he said, I just look at this. He said, let me test one more thing. He said, I bet you have Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is the most common, one of the most common conditions we even see. And it's the
Mm-hmm.
autoimmune condition for thyroid disease. And he said, let me just see if you have any antibodies. He said, I may put you on medicine now, because just with this 3.8 number knocking on 3.9, you have all these symptoms. I was
Right.
puffy, my hands were swollen. I just lost so much hair. I can't even tell you how uncomfortable I was, how miserable I was. And then his nurse called a few days later, and it was almost like, are you sitting down? Because that, when you have the thyroid antibody test, so antibodies show that your little soldiers are fighting the thyroid and not fighting your immune, not fighting if you get a cold. So
Right.
get sicker than my kids. If they had strep throat, I would get it for 5 days. If they had an ear infection, I would get
Wow.
it for 5 days. I would have a stomach virus for 4 days, because my
Wow.
soldiers were fighting the wrong battle, my thyroid.
Mm-hmm.
And so that number used to be about 0 to 40. Well, they called me, mine were greater than 1300. And then
Wow.
a TV friend of mine was murdered in 2008. And then my number got to, and she was my best friend, got to 2400. So you
Oh
see
my goodness.
what stress does to your
Yeah,
body, even though you think,
absolutely.
I'm fine, everybody's good. No, you're not fine.
Right. Right.
So it was
Yeah.
just, so I've had to really, I've woven good health. In fact, I've almost reversed that condition. Now that antibody number is almost not even detectable, because my vitamin D is getting up there. It's finally at 50. I'm trying to get to 70, but that brings your
Mm-hmm.
antibodies down. But the gland of mine is dead from years of it killing itself. The soldiers, remember, were attacking the thyroid gland. So I am on thyroid medicine for the rest of my life, and I'm good with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, I love that you brought in stress because, we almost, evangelize to people that stress is, normal and that it's good. You're supposed to be stressed. And whenever you talk to anybody, and ask them how they're doing, oh, I'm stressed. It's like, no, 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 no. That's not a good thing. Like, obviously,
Right.
stress is something that is something that we deal with, but it's not supposed to be this chronic thing
Right.
that over and over and over. And so,
That's right.
because of that in our culture, people don't realize how much that has had a negative effect on them. And it starts so much younger, I think, than people realize as
Yeah.
well. Being a professor and seeing, over these last 20 years, seeing student after student after student
Oh, I bet.
just, being diagnosed with something, or more and more students needing accommodations because they have this or that or whatever. And so many of them come to my office, for office hours, because I tell them, you can come for more than just sociology help. And I do have several that will come during the semester, and they are overwhelmed, they are
Yeah.
stressed to the max,
Yeah.
grades, and being a part of all these different activities or whatever. And it's like, maybe you need to say no.
Yeah.
Maybe, because then they get sick, they struggle with memory and all these different things. And I'm like, no, 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 this is not normal. So I'm so glad that you
Mhm.
emphasize that as well, just the stress of your life and various things that you dealt with and how that also has affected you too. That's huge. So once you had learned, that you had this particular diagnosis and really got on this road towards, healing yourself and making changes, what kinds of things did you do in terms of, lifestyle, behavior, nutrition that really have had a positive effect on your health?
Well, that's been really the 20-year journey, because in 2003, when I was diagnosed, so 19 years, almost 20 years ago, um, there were some internet sites, but we didn't have really the grasp on functional medicine and some other things with nutrition that we do now. So my best friend and I, my best friend ended up going to IIN, getting her health coaching certification. We wanted to just have bullhorns and stand at the Walmart parking lot and say, "Are you tired, constipated, and cold? You have thyroid disease."
Yeah.
So the first thing I did was evangelize. The
Mm-hmm.
second thing I did, because it's just the way I'm wired, I'm the mouth of the South. The second thing I did was threw out fluoride, because fluoride kills your thyroid. And then I started tweaking some things. Now I know that soy is very inflammatory, gluten is inflammatory to the thyroid, and dairy. So if you're somebody who's kind of on the fence, some of these symptoms resonate with you, you might want to do an elimination diet. It costs you, it's a low price of free, costs you nothing. You just
Mm-hmm.
remove, I would do soy, corn, dairy, and wheat
Mm-hmm.
for like 4 weeks. And eggs bother a lot of thyroid patients too.
Mm-hmm.
I would do that for like 3 weeks at least, and then reintroduce them. And if you start feeling bad again by reintroducing, that's not the food for you. We always say at IIN, love the foods that love you back. And
Right.
so it's finding what those foods are. So I would say that's the next thing I've done, is kind of open my eyes to foods, but also stress. I mean, I get up and for years, I got up at 3:45 or 4 a.m. to do radio. So getting up early is not a challenge
Wow.
for me, but it's really good for your mental health to get up, to get sunlight into your eyes, to
Yes.
tell your pineal gland to produce morning cortisol, but to produce melatonin later. So I look at getting sunlight like it's my job. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I do now, is I'm outside in the morning, have my quiet time on my deck. My house faces, the back deck faces east. So that sun comes up, it's beautiful. And that's why I don't drink caffeine. I don't have coffee or anything. I do have some unsweetened iced tea now, just because I went on a walk. Then I ground in the morning, meaning I
Mm-hmm.
walk outside. Either I have some grounding shoes so they don't have rubber, they have whatever that you can help you walk around, that just helps with pain, brings pain down. So I do that. And then I get back out in the sun later in the day. That's why my vitiligo now is so noticeable. For years, I did like most Americans or most Westerners, in that I was either at the radio station or at the TV station. I was inside.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I went outside, I had 90 sunscreen on,
Yeah.
whatever, which is so poisonous. I mean, it's so
Yeah.
carcinogenic. So now I don't use any sunscreen or anything. And I am of Russian Jewish descent. So my people can tan. It's just that no one's seen a tan on me because I have vitiligo and I haven't been out in the sun in years. So now
Right.
when I'm out, you can kind of see it now. My
Yeah.
kids will, even when they come home, I have one in Dallas, he'll go, "Mom, your vitiligo's worse." I go, "It's not necessarily worse. It's just that I don't protect my skin now from the sunlight, because sunlight is good.
Yeah.
It's therapeutic, and you're seeing the contrast more." Now, I don't get a sunburn, because sunburns are carcinogenic. That's the most
Right.
carcinogenic thing you can do, is get a sunburn or use a carcinogenic sunscreen. You can use zinc oxide or whatever those options are.
Mm-hmm.
So I make sure I don't get a sunburn, and then I get back out when the sun sets tonight. I'll look at the sun as it's setting, as it's face the west, and I just look up for just a second, and then it also signals my pineal gland to make melatonin. All of those things work in tandem and make your thyroid happy. That's why I was saying that sunlight brings those antibodies down. Antibodies are just inflammation toward the thyroid and toward your
Mm-hmm.
body. That's why I felt so bad for those 4 years. And then with that, my nutrition, my sleep, again, I'm a sleep scholar now. I am a professor of sleep,
Yes.
because I make sure I get 8 hours of sleep at night, dark
Mm-hmm.
room, cool room, those things. So I have to work all these things, because like everybody else, we have stress that come into our lives. The one thing I'm learning, though, about stress is, when you push out this cortisol, which is your fight or flight, and in the
Mm-hmm.
morning it gets you going, you want your
Right.
morning cortisol up, and then you want it to come down so that at night you can wind down. But the cortisol that you get from highly stressful situations, that's why people say, my husband died and I gained 30 pounds, or
Mm-hmm.
I got a divorce and I gained 30 pounds. It's not that they turn to the chip and dip. It's that the cortisol was making them
Yeah.
insulin resistant, and insulin resistance is what causes weight gain. So we have to keep the fire down. You have to put a blanket on the cortisol fire. And for some people, that's ashwagandha. This is not medical advice. My attorney wanted me to tell you, but you may want ashwagandha. You may want adaptogens. You have to do everything you can.
Yeah.
That's why, honestly, that's why I turned the TV off March 10th of 2020. That was stressing me because
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't do anything about COVID. And
Yeah.
I felt like it was, the walls were closing in. Plus, literally, they almost were. We had lockdown
Right.
about like you guys did, about 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And we would fight over who was going to get the mail. Like, we were so
Yeah.
glad to go outside.
Yep.
And so, and they were lifted, like in Texas, they were lifted. But during that time, those were dark days too. And I had to work on, so I work on my mental health like it's a job.
Yeah. I think that, you know, you're using such a full approach to making sure that you are healthy. You know, you're doing multiple things, you're staying active, you are getting the sunlight in a healthy way, you are examining your nutrition and making those appropriate changes, and recognizing when things are working well for
Right.
you and when they're not, and you're adjusting that. You know, you're working with various different things, and I think that's why functional medicine is so important, because it's a whole system. You are a whole person. You are not just your thyroid, you're not just your vitiligo, you are not just,
Right.
you know, your background and what happened with your mother. You are a whole person, and all of these things come together to really help you to know how to be a better Lisa, and how to, you know, serve yourself well, and then of course serve your family well as well. So I know you know, I heard you talk a lot about your husband and your children and your grandchildren, and how much you love them and spending time with them, and you know, that obviously is important to you, and you're doing these things in order to be able to, you know, have the best time with them. So I love that you shared all the different things, because it isn't just one thing. There is such a magic bullet kind of mentality in our
Yeah.
culture, with Western medicine, and really with everything. It's like, I want to get my degree. How do I get it fast and, you know, get the A? Or I want to, you
Yeah.
know, get healthy, and how do I get it fast? And, or I want to drop the weight. How do I get it fast? And what's the fastest method? And it's like, well, I need to know who you are. I need to know how you work, how you operate, you know, those types of things. What's been in your past? What are you looking forward to? So that is so, so important. So thank you for sharing all of that. I so appreciate your time.
I have one more thing that I need
Go
to
ahead.
weave into this story, and that is intermittent fasting released me from also the some of my conditions. It has reduced my thyroid medicine. It's made my body work more efficiently, and that also helps. There are studies, scientific studies, that intermittent fasting helps mitigate depression. So anybody
Yeah,
is struggling with any of these things we're talking about, eating in a time restricted manner, it's not starving yourself. All, you know, think about, just, you're skipping breakfast. Just start with skipping breakfast
yeah,
and then go from there. But that's another big component to my overall health.
yeah, absolutely. I actually am a circadian faster.
Yeah.
I basically, you know, try to stop eating around 7. So you know, I'm usually in bed by 9. So I give
Good.
myself a couple hours, and then, you know, 8, 9, 10 in the morning, depending on what my
Yeah.
morning looks like, is when I have my first either meal, and usually it's not meal, it's usually some, you know, coffee with collagen in it. So that's how I
Mhm.
break my fast.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what works for me. And I'm, you know, I'm
Well,
sure
it's
people,
working because you're beautiful. So
oh,
whatever it is.
thank you so much. You know, I don't typically tell people that I'm a faster, in the sense that a lot of people don't really understand what that means. And then they look at me and they go, "Oh, that's why you're so thin." Actually, no, it's not. I've been like this my whole life. And even when I was, 30 pounds heavier in college, that clearly was because of a lot of beer and pizza, but I still was pretty thin because I'm pretty tall. So,
Yeah,
yeah, you gotta know what that really means. But I'm glad that you included that as well, because I know that intermittent fasting has been a huge part of your health
yeah,
journey. It's
yeah,
really
for sure.
helped you, and you're using that knowledge to help other
Yeah,
people.
for
You
sure.
run fasting groups, if
Yeah,
I'm
that's right. Yeah.
right,
My health
right,
coaching, I do fasting groups. I'm about to launch an online course for people who can't, different time zones or just can't
right, right,
accommodate that. And then I do one-on-one coaching. It's just so important to me. And it's kind of a grassroots effort that if we all band together and we start seeing that it's insulin resistance is the root cause, because remember, that's functional medicine is wondering why we're sick,
right.
that high circulating insulin or too much insulin and insulin resistance is the root cause for these things, then we can lock arms and we can all get healthier. And we could, what if everyone got off their medicines? Wow. Now your doctor wouldn't win the trip to Cabo, but you would
Right.
feel better, you would save money. Intermittent fasting saves you so much money. So there's so many benefits of it. But I was saying fasting, not just because you're slim, but your skin is so beautiful. It's that
Oh,
collagen in
thank
the
you.
morning too.
Yes. I'm not going to skip my collagen no more,
Good, good.
Yeah, so fasting is fantastic. My husband does it as well, and his schedule is a little bit different from mine because he gets up at a different time and he goes to bed at a different time. So
Yeah,
I love that fasting can be adjusted to your schedule and to your body. It is not something that is one size fits all, like this
right,
pill that you might get.
right, right,
It's totally adjustable, and I love that it's flexible um, to what you do every day too. Because some days, like I said, some days I maybe get up earlier, and especially when the semester starts, I'm up and out the door, and I'm on the road.
oh, I'm
But
sure.
a couple of days a week,
Yeah,
I'm at home, and so I can use that different schedule with the fasting, and it works so well. So, and again, it's free. So
right.
who doesn't like free?
Right, I'm with you. I'm sister, preacher to the choir. I get it.
Again, thank you so much for being with me today and sharing your story, and sharing all the goodness. And shout out to Lisa Fischer Said podcast. You guys need to go listen to that. She has all kinds of wonderful guests on her podcast. Lots of talk of intermittent fasting. So if you want to hear more about fasting, definitely follow Miss Lisa Fischer, and listen to her podcast, and check her out. So thank you, Lisa, and I will see you soon.
Thank you.